All right. Hi there, U.S. historians. I keep clicking the wrong button here. Okay. All right. Good morning. So today, what we're going to do, okay, is we're going to talk about key term entrepreneur. So that's what I would title your notes. Okay. So first off, an entrepreneur is someone very simply who starts their own business. Okay. So you saw this with our simulation that we did with the paper flowers. Okay. We had three entrepreneurs that had started their own company. Now, that's the definition. Okay, a little bit more here. Okay, is there's always the potential that you could start up a business, right? You invest a lot of money into starting up your own business, and there's no guarantee that it's going to be successful. Okay, and so this is definitely a risk, right? These are people that risk their money because they feel like they have a product or an idea that's going to be successful. Okay, and that hope of making lots of profit. Okay. So the example we're going to keep using, okay, is the concept of monopoly. Okay. So this is a fictional example component to it. Okay. Um, so you don't necessarily have to write this down. More so, it's helpful in your understanding of the two historical characters we're going to look at. Okay. So we're going to use the example of Mr. Monopoly. So let's just say, okay, he owns a lemonade stand and he is selling it a cup of lemonade for 50 cents a piece. Well, a key term we do need to know is the concept of a monopoly. Okay, so if he's the only lemonade stand, okay, on the street, that would make him a monopoly. So what is a monopoly? Essentially, it's defined by the kind of a lack of competition, right? Having control over a market. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be absolute control like our fictional example here. It just means that they have to have, at least the federal government defines it as over 50%, and doing kind of practices that are harmful to competition. So the example that I have, and one of the negatives, is if there's a limit of competition, if there's only one source to get lemonade, well then Mr. Monopoly here can charge ridiculous prices that are way too expensive. So that's one of the harmful aspects of a monopoly that I'd make sure to write down, is like lack of competition then means that prices go up for consumers. If there was another lemonade stand on the block, they would try and compete, right, by maybe selling it for less. So competition between businesses is good for consumers. The other part of it is, okay, I mean, Mr. Monopoly doesn't even make good lemonade. Okay, he's trying to cut costs by using, spoiled lemons. Okay, but because there is no other lemonade stand on the street, he doesn't have to worry about losing customers. So that's another kind of component of monopolies, is a decline in quality of products. Okay, because again, that competition between businesses means that, well, if his business doesn't produce good lemonade, you'd go to another one, and that would either force him to change and improve his product, or he would go out of business. But in this case, if you're a monopoly, you don't have that competition. But hold on. Okay, so then we have Mr. Burns, who opens up a new lemonade stand. Okay, so now Mr. Monopoly has to find a way to keep selling his lemonade. And note here, Mr. Burns is undercutting, selling it for a cheaper rate, right, 25 cents. So the first thing that Mr. Burns could, or the first thing that Mr. Monopoly could do, is try and buy out the competition. Okay, so this is a key term that we need to know. Okay, is horizontal integration, where you try and take over your competition. I'll get into more specifics here in a minute. Now, in my example, Mr. Burns does not agree to sell. Okay, so now let's get to the historical example of what this looks like. So we've learned about and read about this individual in class, John D. Rockefeller. Now, a couple of the key things you need to know about him. He is the owner of Standard Oil. Now, at this time, oil is not used for cars. It's used because those have not been mass produced yet. Okay, this is more for kerosene lanterns for lighting. And so how Rockefeller is going to expand Standard Oil is he's going to drive out the competition, right? He's going to sell his oil at a lower price than it takes to produce. So let's just say it costs, I don't know, $100 to produce a barrel of oil. He'll sell it for 75. So think about that here for a second. He is, at least in that aspect, losing money, okay, selling his product. Now, there's a way that he's able to kind of get by with this. Okay, he is going to get kickbacks from the railroad. So the railroads are legally required to charge the same rate to ship their goods to any company, right? So you can't be like, hey, Standard Oil, we're going to charge you $10 to ship your oil, and another oil company $20. But that's exactly what's happening here. Okay, it's kind of this illegal agreement with the railroad companies to charge him less so that he can like undercut the competition and sell his oil for less money. Okay, so Rockefeller, you don't need to write this down, but just for a scale of like how insanely wealthy this guy was, is he's worth $418 billion in modern day money. Okay, so here is that definition, as I said, of horizontal integration. So very simply, you buy out your competitors when they can't afford to compete. Now note though, what he's going to do is he's going to keep these companies open. Okay, so you can see this in the picture here. And so it creates kind of this illusion of competition where you think that all these companies are competing against one another, but really they're just all owned by one big corporation. So that's one way, okay, that Mr. Monopoly can kind of keep his monopoly. Another is to start buying up the things you need to produce your product. So in this instance, remember we're doing the lemonade stand. He's going to buy a lemon tree farm. So now he doesn't have to like worry about buying it from someone else and the rates constantly changing. Okay, now he owns his supply. Now he can kind of control the cost of how much it takes to produce those lemons, and so he can pay less to make them. That's called vertical integration. Okay, so how I remember this: horizontal is side to side, so you are taking over competitors like on your level. Vertical is up and down, controlling all the steps in the process. So the individual that does this that we've learned about as well is Andrew Carnegie. Okay, so a couple things about him. Okay, he's coming from a poor immigrant family. Okay, and why I mention that is because he kind of believes in the quintessential American dream that like if you're born poor, you can work your way up and become wealthy. Okay, and because that's exactly what he did. Okay, and as we saw in the video, he's going to learn how to mass produce steel, which is going to be used for railroads. It's going to be used for railroad tracks, right? Railroad like trains, okay, eventually skyscrapers. Okay, so vertical integration. So what does that mean? Very simply, it's like you buy out all of your suppliers. So for example, he owns the coal that then could be heated, okay, to then take the iron, which he also owns the iron mines, to then make steel in the steel mills, which he also owns. He owns the freighters, right, the ships and the railroads to ship his goods. Okay, so that's vertical, owning all of the steps of the process. So if he controls every step of the manufacturing, this gives him complete control over the quality of it and the cost of his product. Okay, so back to our lemonade example. Sorry, I'm all over the place with my camera. Okay, so another key term we need to know is a trust, right? Because monopolies, I'm sure you're familiar with, this gets a little bit more complicated. Okay, so in this case, Mr. Monopoly cannot seem to get control over Mr. Burns. Okay, so instead, he agrees to form a trust with Mr. Burns. Essentially, what this means is like they agree to kind of like work together to rig the system. So they're not really competing against one another, which leads to like lowering of prices. Okay. Instead, they're basically saying, all right, we kind of trust each other that we're going to charge the same ridiculous rate for lemonade. Okay. So a trust, it's basically similar corporations, like for example, the lemonade, okay, where it's run by a board of trustees, but pretty much they just kind of control and like work together to regulate prices, to make sure that they are not competing against one another and that they have a profit. So that's why, like kind of what I showed you with Standard Oil, it's that illusion of competition where it's all these companies that you think are kind of competing against one another, but really they're just run by one board of trustees. Right? And then those profits are divided up amongst the corporations to ensure that they kind of rig the system. Okay? This would be a modern day example of that. Okay, you go to a grocery store, you see all these different products, you assume that they're competing against one another. Okay, so let's just say, for example, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, KFC. Okay, well, they're all owned by the Yum Corporation. Okay, so they're not necessarily competing against one another. Okay, it's creating this illusion of competition. Okay, now in order to ensure that they kind of struggle with this concept of being viewed as the bad guys. Okay, so a key term you need to know is philanthropy. This is where you donate money for the instance of like good causes to kind of promote the welfare of the country. So Rockefeller is going to give away half of all of his wealth. Okay, Carnegie is going to give away 90%. So what are they using it for? Libraries, colleges, universities, educational institutions. Now note, they're not giving it directly to their workers. They're not paying them more. Instead, what they're doing is they're creating institutions where the hope is, okay, well, if a steel mill worker is skilled enough to work his way up, he's going to go to college. He's going to get a degree and get a higher paying job, just like Carnegie did. So this is their way of kind of trying to reinforce that American dream. All right, hold on here. Okay. Now, there's definitely a lot of kind of monopolies and issues. So Sherman Antitrust Act. Hold on. I don't think I want to get to this yet. Okay, now let's get by it. Okay. So that's all I got for today. Okay. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Stay awesome, historian.